Welcome back to Tasteland, folks. I'm Francis Steer,
And I'm Daisy Aliotto, co-host of Tasteland.
co-host of Tasteland. We do have a guest today, but before we get to that, we have some things to talk about. Nothing too important, but Daisy, who are we talking to today?
Our guest is my friend Emily Sundberg. She has the hottest business newsletter on Substack called Feed Me. And I've known Emily since I was working weekend social media for New York Magazine.
You
She's
both worked there
done.
at the same time?
I don't remember how big the overlap was, but she, like me, has a background in audience development and has moved between the world of media and startups. And I think it gives her like a really unique point of view. Like we talk about the audience for this podcast being people who sit in the center of the Venn diagram of caring about technology and culture. And like that is Emily. Emily
True.
is like our ideal Tasteland listener and also our ideal Tasteland guest. And watching her start her own media company has been really thrilling. And I'm really excited to talk to her about what her goals are for Feed Me in 2025.
You also had come up with a kind of theme for this episode,
Yes.
which I like. And I've put together some questions. I think it'll be a good one. I'm curious how you came up with this theme, which is why does nothing feel special anymore? How did this
Well,
come to you?
I don't want to like I
Give
feel
away
like I
the
undersold in the
yeah.
intro. She started her own media company, but like Feed Me is an addictive read.
Mm-hmm.
Emily like moves between stuff that might be considered more like gossip and then also like really great sort of critical analysis of what's happening in culture right now. And I think things being special is like a thread that runs through a lot of Feed Me because
Mm-hmm.
she's bringing an almost like old school perspective to it, like we've talked about with magazines, where things really are containers for taste.
Mm-hmm.
And the areas of culture that she talks about, like restaurants, transit, all different types of third spaces, like membership clubs and running clubs. I feel like if you distill like what do people want out of this, like yes, it's status and a sense of belonging, but they want to feel like they're part of something special and ultimately they want to feel special, which is what status is.
Mm.
And around the holidays, I was reflecting, and I think this was mentioned in Feed Me as well, on like a big part of office culture and office culture in the heyday of magazines were like these office parties.
Yeah.
And I can't remember if I told you this story, but like when I was a contractor at Airmail, Graydon Carter, who used to
Oh,
be the editor-in-chief of Vanity
the
Fair.
buckets?
Yeah, did I tell you about the
We
ice
talked about
bucket?
this on the mailbag episode. Yeah.
Did we?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry.
It was so long ago now.
Yeah, so 2 weeks ago.
It
Anyway,
was last
like,
year.
everyone gets like a gift, and I'm like, well, I don't want to too much a tangent. Like, I'm still receiving holiday cards right now, and I'm still receiving
Mm-hmm.
gifts from friends and some people that I work with. Kat, shout out to Kat. Like, I got her holiday package the other day, and it was so special and tailored to me. She sent me stickers, an art print. She printed out one of my favorite collages from this artist that we work with, and I was like, okay, like, there are people who are still making an effort to make things special, but I think the friction to that is so high.
I
And I
mean,
also
personally, I only got like a couple of nice holiday emails and maybe one or two cards. So, you've got a rich life, Daisy.
and my friend Alex sent me a like a shell shaped like jewelry dish
Mm-hmm.
yesterday. It just matches another shaped jewelry dish that I have. I really feel so loved, and I'm still getting my holiday cards out. So like now I'm the culprit and not
Mm-hmm.
maintaining this specialness. But I did wonder, I was like, what does my husband think as I like continue to get these like cards and packages? But this sort of like feeds into something else we were talking about this morning, which is I sort of popped off a little bit about this article in The Atlantic by Serena Dye about why
Mm-hmm.
men are so bad at texting. I actually don't think that this is gendered.
Which just to say, this was like I experienced this as like a Twitter meme. It was like a screenshot of the headline on the Atlantic, and just
Yes.
so you've seen a bunch of people retweeting it, kind of like one of those
Yes.
just little discourse dust bunnies.
Yes. And like this, I don't think it's gendered. I don't think it's exclusively men, but often
Mm-hmm.
it is men. Basically talking about like why are they bad at texting? And I responded to somebody that I didn't want it ratio, so I screenshotted their response and tried to cut out their
You cut out half of
okay,
their profile. You left
whatever.
the bottom
Sorry.
half of their profile.
Okay, well, basically, they were saying, and I've heard this from people I care about before, like, you get a text and you know it's important, you want to respond to it correctly, and then you let too much time pass and you enter this guilt spiral.
Yeah,
Mind
been
you,
there.
this happened with my female cousin one summer, and my cousin, my flesh and blood, she ghosted me for maybe like 6 months because she felt so bad.
6 months.
Yeah, she like a really long time.
Yeah.
And I remember being really confused and hurt by it. And so like my response, basically I told this person as a baby brain and goo goo gaga, because like there's things that like we know we don't want to do and we just do them, like filling your car with gas and like responding to somebody in an imperfect but timely way. To me, like you can't just put it in a different category. That being said, like I do have empathy and I understand that there's certain like attachment styles and like attention deficits that contribute to this stuff. But as somebody who also like is close with people who have like overcome a lot of that, I think I want to make very clear I'm not talking about people who take a couple days to respond or somebody who's like so consistent that like I know they always take 5 days to respond and I don't question it. I mean like being so inconsistent or like that you're essentially like soft ghosting people intermittently with no way to sort of predict where this is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think that your own guilt or neuroses should come ahead of making sure the people that you care about know that you care about them and that they can rely on you for a response. And I don't think it's acceptable not to overcome that as an adult.
Speaking of responses, Emily is in the lobby.
We gotta ask her about this. Okay.
Hello,
Hello.
Hi. What's up, guys?
Welcome.
How's it going?
So we were just talking about the article in The Atlantic about why men are so bad at texting.
At texting? Yeah, I saw that on Twitter this morning. I didn't really read it, but I can assume.
I also didn't read it. I don't know if Daisy actually read it either, but she did kick over a hornet's nest, I guess.
No, I was responding to a response. I saw some screenshots of it. I also saw like a quote tweet by somebody who's like, I'm a man. And I texted like a guy friend that my dad has lymphoma, and this person just didn't respond to me for weeks.
That's me though. That's me. Like I am not answering all the texts that I'm getting. I don't know what that guy's life is and what his inbound texts look like, but like I'm not answering I'm not even opening them.
Are you, Emily, do you have like, 100, is it like 100 unread notifications? Is the text notifications clean? What's the number there?
Let's look.
Because I keep it at 0. I have
like 92 right now.
92.
92.
Daisy, how about you?
I would say I probably have 0.
Yeah, you probably have 0. I'm not type
0.
A, but I also like between the group texts and the ones that kill me are like, I'd love to pick your brain from, which we all hate, right?
Yeah.
But from like corners of the internet where I'm like, why did I give you my number?
Yeah. See, I don't have the
That's
messages thing. I try to keep these things in various, whether it's email or Twitter or Instagram, and then I have all notifications on my phone turned off for all those. I only keep text message and like phone notifications on. So then it's like I can just ignore those. But then if I go into Twitter, then I'm going to check like the 6 group chats.
Yeah. I mean, men, whether they suck at texting or not, I think a lot of people are getting worse at texting because it's becoming similar to an email inbox. Like there's work in there, there's personal in there, there's the text from the place that you went to once for a dentist appointment, there's people introducing you, whatever. So everybody's getting worse at it unless you are consciously trying to be excellent at it, which I'm definitely not.
But do you feel like you have enough mechanisms to filter for like the prioritized personal? No. Okay, interesting. Well, this is what I was saying before you came on. I actually don't think that it's gendered.
No, I don't either.
The Atlantic just gendered it for clicks to be screenshotted.
And it's not a deal breaker for me, but it does change the way that I view a relationship with somebody if there is like consistent lack of communication. But it's not even a texting thing. Like
Yeah.
That goes for anything.
Yeah. Like, I'm very present for people when I'm in front of them, but
Mhm.
I'm not the best texter.
Okay, Daisy, how does this dovetail with your question about why nothing is special
My
anymore? Is
theme for the
texting not special? Was
episode.
texting ever special?
Well, I don't know. It's so hard to say because, like, um, my friend Justin, who I really respect, he sort of replied to my tweet and was like, this kind of describes me and I feel defensive. And so we were going back and forth. And like, what we realized was like, it does feel like technology has changed the nature of this obligation in the timeline you're expected to respond on. But I think people have always put effort into their correspondence. Like, I think I've seen even growing up, my mom would like sit at the kitchen table and like fill out
Mm.
cards. Like I was telling Francis, I'm still getting holiday cards from people and I still need to get my holiday cards out. So, um, yeah, technology has changed the nature of that obligation. And, you know, getting a text does not feel as special as getting a card. And what I admire about Feed Me, this is all in the intro, what I'm telling you, Emily, like what I admire about Feed Me is the thread that runs through it of what level of specialness do we expect from third spaces, transit, restaurants, the media that we consume, the creators that we follow? Like, and I'm using special to mean wanting to feel like you're part of something special, but
Mhm.
also wanting to feel special in the sense of like status as we traditionally understand it. And sometimes removing friction from things can change our relationship to it. And that's, I think texting is so low friction that
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
would put it in that category. But also too much friction can make things not feel special. Never being able to get a reservation somewhere
Mhm.
makes it
Mm.
bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes being able to get a reservation there makes it feel
I think that's right.
nice.
Yeah, special. Like there's the possibility of surprise. I mean, even I was talking to Jake, my boyfriend, fiance,
I was gonna
but I,
say,
I like
not
boyfriend
anymore. You
better.
like
I
Yeah.
boyfriend
recently got
better? It
engaged
just
too. I'm also having trouble with the
Yeah, I'm gonna
term
say
changing.
boyfriend. How going to Starbucks and getting coffee now, it's like a machine. Like you go
Mhm.
in, you leave because everybody's ordering online. So it's just like this place
Just
that
the
you
30
go in
cups
and
on
you
the
leave
table.
with your
Mhm.
item. Where when I was younger, like going into Starbucks was like sensory, and you could look in the pastry case and you could look through the CDs and you ordered and you looked at the menu and like there was discovery happening. And now it's just like you're in, you're out. You're not making eye contact with the person who works there. You're not even looking at their name tag. It's like you walk in, you pick up your thing, and you leave. And it's like
Mhm.
just press a button in these real life experiences. So that would be something with so little friction. And you mentioned trains. Like I go on the subway every day and I look up and I'm like, I really wish people were making some more eye contact. Like I wish it's like the perfect idea of how Steve Jobs wanted the iPhone to grow. Like I
Mhm.
think about the iPhone so differently in the subway because everyone is looking at it. And then last night I was on the train late at night and there's literally people smoking crack and like everybody's making eye contact. And that's a level of friction maybe I didn't want that much.
mhm,
Like I didn't want
mhm.
that much to be in the world. I just wanted to be a little bit more. And like, yeah, I don't love that.
Well,
But
wait, this reminds me, I read Kate Lindsay's Embedded latest issue of that like a couple days ago, and she was talking about, you know, there's the people have been tweeting the past like week or so about like, oh, like I'm bored. There was that one about like why can't I read? And people were tweeting, it's because you're not bored enough. And so Kate wrote an essay about this. And she was talking about like, like limiting social media apps to an hour a day, but how like the feeling of being on the train and being bored and like forcing herself to like being bored, not forcing herself to like talk to a stranger on the train or like in line at the pharmacy, but ending up doing it because she's bored, because she can't look at her phone. So it's like, I don't know. I was also thinking like the answer to why nothing is special anymore, if that's what we're saying, is as everything else, it's the phones, right? Which is a little boring to say, but
Mhm.
I mean, it is the phones, right? It's like the constant dopamine drip turning what could have been a peak into just
yeah,
like the plateau.
I also like I'm wondering what you think about Daisy, I feel like you have thoughts on this. Like, is the onus of making things special on the person? Like, you might have a really boring train ride. You might think the train is, or you might think that like the train is boring because you're on your phone. I might be on that same train and decide to start a conversation with somebody. So isn't it like on me to make the experience more special? A
Yeah,
little?
I feel like it's like the solution for individuals are like different from the solution for like businesses.
Mm.
And I think that's part of the context collapse of like discourse. It's like we talk about obligations like for an individual the same as we talk about like, you know, the person that you are ordering from at Sweet Green has like the same culpability and like our social collapse as like the CEO of a healthcare company. And it's like, hold up, hold up. Like, you know what I mean? Like if your barista's having a bad day and they're not like super sweet to you when they hand you the coffee, it's different than, you know, Starbucks actively making decisions that prioritize online ordering over going into the store. But to answer your question, like I think as individuals, like we all have an obligation of care to like other people. Like if you're coming into a public space, like we always like my mom always did like the Girl Scout thing, like, oh, leave it better than you found it. So like every interaction with somebody in public, you hope they walk away better off than they came into the conversation. But I also think like I don't want to there's also like ways in which we really push like individual choice that I think doesn't totally account for how hard things can be like economically, you know.
Mm-hmm.
People are tired. I saw there was another discourse this week of somebody, a young person like tweeted a not screen cap, oh my god, a photo of the Good Night Moon book, which I literally was just reading to my best friend's son the other day. And that I go on Twitter, somebody posted a screen cap and was just like saying this is their ideal weekend, and somebody else quoted tweeted and was like, you're in your 20s, like you need to be having more fun, like you're a loser basically. And it's like, well, that's like not very nice. I do think 20s should be going out learning that you only learn through making mistakes, dating and socializing yourself. But I also realized that like uh things were hard in their 20s and expensive, and they're probably harder and more expensive now.
Definitely. And I also think that that person who thinks that like they're a loser, that the ideal night, like the person saying that you're a loser because you want to read or live Goodnight Moon, they probably, if they took a step back, they probably just think like taking a photo of that and tweeting that is the loser behavior. Like,
Yeah.
because
It's
they
such a
definitely have
tired
nights, that
thing to
person
do.
saying like you're a loser, they definitely have nights off where they're chilling. They
Yeah.
probably are just not making it their identity.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think it's like this was like the performative, I want to go home early. The performative, I want to cancel plans. To me, it's just as hollow as like the performative, I need to be out every night or I can't function. It just represents two different extremes.
Well, I'm doing like dry January, right? You know, here it is. We're a week into January. But like talking to my fiance about this, where it's like, obviously, you know, holiday season, there's so many going to dinner at this friend's house, dinner at this restaurant, drinking this bottle of wine, et cetera, et cetera. And I like what I was saying is like, you know, like it should be a celebratory thing. I don't want to just like go be at the bar and like have like a beer and a shot on a Thursday night. Like, what is the point of me doing that at this point? Like, maybe that was fun when I was 23 and like maybe it was special then and it felt special. But now it's like, I want to like reorient going out or like, you know, like drinking too much as like being this special thing and like not something that I just like end up doing kind of by accident. And then I wake up the next day and I'm like, why did I now I'm like tired and hungover today? And what was the point of that? Like that was not special, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. See, I love the beer and a shot. Like I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Like but it's so, I mean, do I love being hungover once a month in a way that I'm like, what the fuck?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Well,
But when
maybe
I'm,
once a month, you know.
yeah, hangovers, I try to avoid those.
When you have a daily newsletter, a hangover is really like,
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing in the world.
yeah.
But when you get a beer and a shot with another person, like it changes how
Yeah.
the night goes versus if you go get a manicure and a cup of tea and say,
Mhm.
peace out, see you
Mhm.
next time.
Mm-hmm.
But I get I don't know. This is something I struggle with a lot. People talk more when they have a beer and a shot.
Mm-hmm. And you need them to talk.
I do, for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yeah.
We are a couple friends texted us on Friday and we're like, we're having an impromptu dinner party on Saturday. And then they, with like two other couples, they dropped everyone to a group chat and they were like, here's the menu. We're doing all Alison Roman. We're doing braised short ribs. We're doing this fennel salad, da da da. And like sent us all the menu. And I was like, ooh, this is like really like
Special.
this is kind of special. Yeah. Not that I don't get together with my friends, but I can't remember in the last time somebody was like, hey, come to our house. We just woke up and decided we're going to have a dinner party tomorrow. Here's who's coming. Here's a group chat for everyone. And here's the menu. And then everyone sent the pictures that they took of the food at the party to like the chat after. And I feel like a slightly older person would be like, that's so dystopian that you guys did that. Like, why did everyone come to the party have to be in a group chat? Why did you all take pictures like of the food and then send them to each other after? But for me, I was like, this is such an improvement over the way other social plans come together sometimes. It made me feel closer to the other couples there that I didn't know that well. And I felt like we established a baseline of getting to know each other that would carry into like the next time I saw these people.
I like that so much more than what are you doing in 4 Saturdays? And the countdown begins to that plan that you agreed to now. Like,
yes.
I love that. I think that that whole idea, I want to copy that.
Daisy, what was the average, important question, what was the average age of the people at this dinner?
Probably like 36.
Okay, because we're all, early 30s on this pod right now. And I was thinking about this last night, whereas this talk of like, what is special? And Emily, you just said about like, planning the thing 4 weeks from now. Like, is this crisis of special that we're talking about a function of like being in your early 30s and coming out of your 20s when things were more spontaneous and stakes were lower? And now it's like figuring out how to like live in this next phase of life. I don't know. Maybe that's part of it for me, I think, but I'm curious if you two agree.
I have a theory, which is that at least for the people on this podcast, like your Rolodex just gets bigger and bigger as you like get older.
Mm-hmm.
And I find personally, I feel this unspoken pressure to like keep tabs on all those people and like get in some sort of FaceTime with all of them. And like that's how you measure closeness. So I'm unintentionally like constantly like checking off who I've seen every month or every other month. And I'm like, I need to catch up with them, get a drink, get a coffee. And it's like neither of us really necessarily want to or need to do this to like put a stamp that we've seen each other and confirmed our closeness, but we're doing it anyway. So I think it's less about like spontaneity and more about like keeping people in the fold and like keeping people like updated on your life and like confirming. I'm curious, like Daisy, do you feel that? Is this like a girlfriend thing? Like,
I think the risk as you're getting older, part of it is like letting time pass and not seeing people. But I also think like the trap of your 30s as more people get coupled and have kids is that you stop seeing intimacy as something that you can have in platonic relationships and you shove all of your intimacy into your marriage and your relationship with your children. And I think that's very dangerous because it's a lot of pressure to put on those relationships, but you're also losing something that we intuitively know in our 20s, which is like you do learn about yourself through the intimacy of friendships, where you can become a better communicator, a better friend, and establish those bonds, even if you don't see somebody for coffee every month, that like, if you need that person, they will be there. That is one other person in the world who knows you beyond the surface level. And to me, having multiple people that know me beyond the surface level, apart from my husband, is very important to my sense of myself in the world, and also like my sense of myself as a writer, and as somebody who wants to be like read and understood and known by other people. And so I've watched people kind of treat their friends differently after becoming married, and of course your priorities shift, but I've never wanted to be that person. And I think, yeah, I just think to me it's about intimacy, and that looks different in like every relationship. Sometimes it's like a phone call. Like I have friends I literally have a phone call with once a year and we talk for 2 hours
Mm.
and they don't talk to them in between. And then I have other people that I text with every day.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Feed Me for a second. So
Oh,
obviously,
you don't want to talk about intimacy,
we can talk
Francis?
about intimacy. No, but we can get back to that.
No, we should talk about Feed Me.
But what I want to ask about in the context of this conversation about specialness is obviously you've started scaling it. You're wearing the sweatshirt with the new logo,
Yeah, we're in my
debuted a
They're
couple months
stacked in the
ago. They're
back,
stacked right
yeah.
there for
The
sale.
special moment of mailing merch to your
But
readers.
I'm thinking about like the business aphorism, right? Like do things that don't scale, and how like what that is saying is like, you know, those are the things, those high friction things that are special. But as you turn it like less into something, a newsletter written by Emily and more into like a publication edited by Emily with other voices, like what have you done? Obviously you're thinking about this, like how to keep that specialness that people like about it. What are you doing to like preserve that?
Well, there are a lot of things. So I have 3 columnists now, and they're all writing only once a month. So that's 3 out of every 20 letters you're seeing a voice besides my own. And even those ones are getting like all 10 of my fingerprints on them. So there are people that still are not realizing that, like, even though I do the layup of like, this is another person who's writing this, there's still people who are like, wait, you have 5 siblings? I'm like, no, that's the transit guy that I just introduced who has 5 siblings who's
Open
writing.
schools.
Um, so, obviously like my name's on it, my byline's on it on Substack. It's coming from Emily at Feed Me in the sender address in your inbox. And, as I said, like every letter I'm writing it right now besides the contributors. On top of that, I heavily like moderate and interact in the comment section and in my chat. So people are getting my voice in the letter and then back and forth in real time in chats and comment sections. There is something funny I've noticed about my events, which is like I've had 10-person dinners and I've had 300-person parties. And the parties, I realized like if I walked out, nobody would really say, where's Emily? Because they're there. The people who come to those are there for each other. They're there to be around people who are excited about the same things that they are and interested about in the same things that they are, which is like the contents of the letter, not necessarily me. Where I think there's probably different sorts of creator events where if the creator left the room, people would be looking for that person to either take a photo or a selfie or something. Mm-hmm. Where with Feed Me events, that's not the idea, which I'm really grateful for. Maybe a few girls would be like, where's Emily? I want to like ask for her number to figure out how to get a job.
Which she would not respond to. No, I'm just kidding.
Which I would be like, yeah, DM me, like happy to, and then it would get lost in the DMs.
Well, as somebody who accidentally went to one of your parties by making plans to go to the same restaurant a Feed Me party was occurring at, and was very happy to realize I had accidentally gone to your party, I would have noticed if you weren't there. But because we have a relationship that pre-exists,
right, you'd be like, where's my friend? And then I guess the other thing to say is like, I'm in this great position where most businesses at year 2 are probably trying to become profitable and like aren't necessarily thinking about scale and like diversification, but I'm profitable. I have almost 0 overhead. I don't have any investors and I have no team besides 3 guys who occasionally are writing for me. Like I'm doing fulfillment myself for the sweatshirts that are stacks behind me. I'm doing my design. I'm doing my social media. I'm selling my ads. Which gives me a ton of options in terms of where I want to take this thing on a day-to-day basis, but also like long-term, I'm steering the car, which is a great position to be in. Further down the line, I think you'll probably see maybe another 1 or 2 contributors this year. And, I don't think the readers will ever notice if I'm starting to dedicate a significant amount of attention to a separate project, because I would always want to make sure that the daily newsletter feels like it's in my voice. And I think that cadence of daily will always exist. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, Daisy, I have a question for you now too. I'm going to read a paragraph from a piece that you published this week in Dirt. So,
wow.
2024 was the year I lost my faith in language. It happened gradually until one day I no longer believed words held the same weight. Life went on without interruption. I was a loving wife, a responsible daughter, a generous friend to acquaintances new and old. But I wasn't the same person because I was no longer harboring a certainty in words and all the care and harm they could contain. So I pulled that because I thought, like, in the context of this conversation about like specialness, words losing common meaning is this degradation of the special, right? It's kind of all it's all one, it's all part of the same thing, I think.
I agree. I think, we were talking about before where there's like the personal and the political,
Many such cases.
sorry. So like individual responsibility, and then there's like the responsibility as a citizen, and then there's like corporate responsibility not to erode our cultural fabric by, completely undercutting a city's like taxi system or transit system or any way that you want to critique how technology can run interference in culture without the emotional intelligence now sort of like coming back in, and the humanism, which I know you've been tracking, Emily, as well, the sort of more humanist founder, the fact that we're like talking about the humanities again as we're talking about AI. And like these conversations like aren't great, but they're happening. I don't know, something that I've been saying recently, actually, like in business and also in my personal life, is like, in order to like maintain truth consensus, like what I like to say, and I have different ways of saying this, I'm not like texting it to somebody in like therapy speak, it's basically like, we can disagree on the solution to a problem, but we need to agree on the reality. We need to agree on the facts. And you might feel like these facts mean our friendship needs to change, or that we can make this this contractor agreement work, or we can plan this event together. I might look at the facts and say, no, actually, this contract isn't going to work. We want different things, or actually, our vision for this event is too different. But we have to agree on the facts as like at bare minimum, and that's actually helped me a lot. Because it's really hard when like people don't agree on the solution to a problem. But what's really damaging to me, as somebody who cares about the truth, and like why I sort of like had this crisis of language, is like I felt like people were communicating without this consensus.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's almost like, it's as like disorienting as like believing in God and then suddenly waking up and being like, God's not real.
Okay,
Does that
well,
make sense?
yes, this does make sense. This reminds me of a tweet I saw the other day that was
Oh, it
known that was
doesn't.
getting like retweeted and roasted, where it was this guy saying, "Yeah, it's true. I heard it on multiple podcasts." Right? Yeah. Which was, he
Oh
was
my
talking
God.
about like the idea that like Ozempic makes food rot in your gut, and then you have bad breath or something like that. But also, this makes me think how this morning or yesterday, whatever, Zuck announced that Facebook is getting rid of the fact checking team for a community note system, which honestly I like on Twitter, but it's like what that is getting rid of, like, whether the truth knowing ability of these like fact checkers and content moderators aside, it's like getting rid of these specially selected arbiters of truth for like the community sourced idea of truth, which like is, like you want this, you do want this community sourced idea of like what reality is. Reality is this thing that multiple people agree on, right? But it's also like slippery and dangerous. Is it? I don't know. Like when there's like so many more people in the community note system rather than like a couple people deciding what's true and then rallying around that. What do you guys think?
I think it's scary and dangerous because we know that there's all these conversations happening right now that like the mainstream media is done. We have this new president that's going to be inaugurated in a few days, a few weeks, whatever. Like, I think that it's just as a whole piece, we're all agreeing. Like I did this in and out list that was crowdsourced a few days ago on Feed Me.
So good.
And thank you. that's just, I mean, that it was great because my readers are smart. I keep thinking like, it must suck to have a newsletter audience of dumb readers. Like, I'm so lucky that I have such an interesting group of people who are willing to contribute to these surveys that I do. But one of the common outs was truth as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was across industries, whether it was tech or news and journalism or entertainment. Like, everybody is getting comfortable with having the agency to create their own facts and data, and then you sort of start to hear it in arguments, people using exactly what you just said, which is, I've heard it on a few podcasts though, and they'll hurt the person they're debating with that.
I've done my own research. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the meta news is more alarming through the lens of this changing conversation across industries.
Well, you worked at Meta, right?
Yeah.
How, like, you know, in your opinion, like, having worked there, do these sort of announcements really have massive changes on the way Meta does business internally? Or is this more like signaling for a certain type of person?
I mean, listen, like, Meta was bigger than, bigger than some countries' entire governments. Like, it was just, it's so big and siloed. Transparently, it was too big. Like, when I was working there were a lot of people that did nothing. Like, when they announced layoffs, I was like, good, there's half the people on this floor are spinning around in their chair and just like eating all the free food, like not
Must
producing.
Be nice.
Totally. So when they did layoffs, it was like, duh, none of you do anything. I think the word Mark was using at the time was efficiency, and I'm glad that he leaned into that, and I'm sure his shareholders were happy about that.
I need him to lean out of the t-shirt and chain look though. Like,
yeah. I kind of like it.
I like that you also say Mark, not Zuck or Zuckerberg.
A few people have said that to me. Like, yeah, Mark. So I don't know. I think he's doing a lot right now to appease the incoming like Trump people.
Yeah. Okay, if we're talking about tech companies and truth and special, I want to call back to your Machine in the Garden essay, but specifically one thing in there. You quote Chris Best. Certified classic. Chris Best, Substack co-founder, he had said in 2020, I think it was, and you quote this, we want to help massively grow the size of the market for great writing so much more of it can be created. And so I was rereading that yesterday, like in the context of what I knew we were going to talk about today, and reading that, it's like, I'm thinking again about like abundance, and does abundance make something less special if there's, which we, setting aside whether or not the supply of great writing has been increased or decreased through like creator economy democratization. I don't know. I think that's a whole nother,
or the demand.
I think that's a whole nother conversation. But I guess what I'm asking here is, like, when you increase the supply of this thing, does it become special? Is it like the floor for great writing is just higher and that's good, or is it just that, like, is there the same amount of great writing but there's more bad writing and the great writing is more special? I don't know.
I think it's the way that he presented it, right? Because, like, by Daisy creating dirt and creating opportunities for more people to write awesome, have a new place to write, like, we champion that. That's really incredible. Or somebody else creating an awesome literary magazine, we champion that structure of, like, I want to promote more voices besides my own. Great writers pitch me. Like, we champion that. I think that Daisy as an editor understands where to look for these voices, and she's not like the people with the most Twitter followers that, like, we're gonna break the internet. Like, maybe sometimes you want to break the internet, which you should and you have, but it's through that's a familiar structure to us, like platform, magnet for talent, and it's paced in a way that we recognize. I think something about the way that I said this in the Machine in the Garden essay, which is like the same way. I think the problem here is that if Instagram made everybody photographers, does Substack make everybody writers? Yes and no. Like, technically, by definition, if you're posting on Instagram, you're a photographer, right? Like if you're writing on Substack, you're a writer, right? Like I think as users of Substack, you have to question, and this is work, you have to question like what do you consider good? And this is what spun out into the entire debate in the comment section. People were getting angry at me, basically defending themselves, saying like, I am a good writer.
People
You're
were so
judging
attacked.
people, whatever. Yeah, it was like 3 days where I questioned why I did that. And then after that, I realized, oh, we have very different bars. We have
Mhm.
very different opinions. And when you say that to somebody, they almost like take it back. They're like, oh, that's what's happening. Like you see the world differently than I do. I want to understand, like, I want to understand where you're coming from. Like you're not apologizing. Like I didn't ever apologize for it.
This is what we're talking about, though, like truth consensus, which is like, okay, we agree on the facts, which is that Substack has made it possible for anyone to be a writer. We don't agree on the secondary
On what
impact
writer
or the solution,
means.
which is like, yeah, what writer means, or like whether the writing is good. We have different standards. And it's like, that's great. We're aligned on the reality. But like, yes, we just have different standards and nobody needs to apologize for that. Well, sometimes I think people with low standards should apologize, but you certainly don't need to for having written that and started that conversation. I think for me, what seems the hubris for me as somebody who really doesn't have any animosity towards Substack comes from like what seems like their desire to basically make Substack the Q-tip of having a newsletter. Like Q-tips are cotton swabs, but we call all cotton swabs Q-tips. And I think
Mm-hmm.
Substack would be very happy if we called all newsletters Substacks. Like somebody asked me the other day, they were like, "Oh, Daisy has a Substack." Dirt hasn't been on Substack for 2 years. And I wasn't like offended. I was just like, the agenda is working.
Right.
Which is wild because like we don't call a fashion magazine a Vogue. I mean, we might sometimes I think things get compared to Vogue often, but like if somebody started magazine and they were like, oh, you have your own Vogue, it's like, what are you talking about? It's a magazine, it's a distribution mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes if I write for another place or if I get interviewed somewhere, they'll say like Emily writes the newsletter Feed Me. And then other places, depending on their style, will say Emily writes the Substack Feed Me. Um,
Do you have an emotional reaction to that?
I used to, and now I'm just like, this is where I am. Like
Mhm.
this is where I work. This is what I do. It's
I've
fine.
said this multiple times on this podcast, but John Ganz's book on the author flap, it says that he writes the newsletter on Unpopular Front for Substack, which is the only time I've ever seen that. I thought it was crazy that that was printed in the book.
That's funny.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And then people do like Substacker, which I don't like that.
Yeah.
People will still say blog, which is funny. Um,
Right. At least nobody owns blog though.
yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
But I don't see what you're doing as blogging necessarily, or if you do write a blog, it's obvious to me which feed me dispatches are blogs and which aren't. To me, a blog is like an unresearched, opinionated, short, well written dispatch on a single topic.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Some of them are, some of them aren't. Most of the time, you're doing something else. But when you're
And then
blogging, I feel like
technically
I
they're
know.
all newsletters because they all are
Mhm.
sent
Yes,
out to your,
yes,
right? So it's like,
yes.
I mean,
um,
this whole idea of like, I mean, okay, not about newsletters, but about creators, right? Like, I write
mhm,
Creator Spotlight for Beehive, and my joke is that like the entire point is to like find a different definition of creator every week, and like,
Mm.
which is not really a joke. Like, that is what I think about every week and every day. And I mean, really, like the word is comes from YouTube, right? And it's like YouTube decided to call the people on their platform creators. And so what a creator is somebody making user generated content for a platform that's purpose is to host and distribute user generated content. And so like that's the original definition of it. But like where I come now is like it's basically any platform that allows you to be a creator that enables creating has its own definition, but I'm like always searching for like more the umbrella one, which now though, like I think it's more split into like the walled garden creators, what if you're on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, where it is just this limited thing versus the open internet or like open ocean creator who's like creating for the internet, whether, you know, whether that's like you just have a website or you're on Beehive or you're on like ConvertKit, whatever it is, and you're like contributing to the corpus of the internet more broadly rather than like the corpus of a platform. Um, I don't really know where I was going with this, but I think the point was that like I like the word creator is like there is no one definition. Like I have a few, but like if somebody asks me like what is a creator, I'll like say one. I'm like, oh, it's somebody who like makes makes and distributes content for the internet and probably monetizes it. But then I'll be like, but wait, but actually it's like, well, there's this and then that and then this and then that. Um because there are just so many truths of it.
Yeah. I would use the same definition as you for creator.
Yeah.
Emily, I have a question for you. And I saw some tweets about wedding planning. Um, I think this comes back to this idea of specialness. Like, are you starting to think about like, how to apply like some of these critiques about culture now and like the way that we document our lives to like planning your own wedding, and like have you thought through whether you're gonna like share aspects of
Make
that
people put
with
their phones
the
in a
Okay,
audience?
brick bag.
Yeah.
that's okay. Well, I was thinking
Because
more of
like
like,
people do have a parasocial relationship with Feed Me.
dude, I did a Q&A on New Year's Eve,
Mhm.
and I with my most of my interviews on Feed Me, whether it's other people or myself, only paid readers get to ask questions. And so many people were asking if I was going to share my wedding process. And then I work with WME sometimes, and they were like, are we going to sell parts of your wedding? And like, no. And probably not. I don't really share that much of my personal life. My Instagram is private right now. I don't really share photos of my boyfriend, fiance. You guys don't see photos of my house. I like to talk about things and like put them into like weave them into the letter the way that I like to do that. I don't see myself being like, and I could be wrong, but I don't see myself as being like week 1 wedding planning. Like, here's what I'm doing last night, got a facial, learned these 10 things. Here's what you should buy. I don't like to be the focal point of, I don't want my face to ever be the reason why this thing is successful.
Wait. Question. So I've listened to your episode on How Long Gone whenever that came out, and
Yeah.
then I listened to the one People versus Algorithms. I listened to that episode you did last night, and on both of these, you brought up the same story about being at a restaurant with your fiance,
and now we're gonna bring it up a third time.
And I'm sorry, but but basically, like this person at the end of the dinner asks you, like, says, like, oh, I love Feed Me afterwards, and you're like, and it upset you, and I'm wondering if that was like part, like if that predated or was part of why you like stopped putting your face
that was
yourself
exactly
in.
why.
Yeah.
That was exactly why. In my 20s, like I wasn't a public figure. I wasn't like, I just had a 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing this sort of echo online in like subreddits and stuff, like where did this girl come from? And like I was working, so you didn't see me. You don't like, there's not a timeline to follow on Instagram of like what I was doing because I was working. And I don't like being talked about online.
Yeah.
So a good way to do that is to not really post yourself.
Yeah.
Online. And I'm sure that will change, just even like with press and can you tell this is a topic I'm uncomfortable about? It's just my life has changed a lot in the last 12 months. Feed Me has grown a bit. I have a lot of new people in my life. I have a lot of just my financial situation has changed. I'm obviously running my own company now. So I'm just adjusting to it. It's a lot of changes.
It's so funny to hear you say that because I feel like I said something verbatim, like very similar when I was on Long Reads, which is like, the host was like, I went into my email to reach out to you to ask you to be on, and I didn't realize you were the same Daisy that emailed me from New York Review of Books and emailed me from like some other place that I worked. And I was kind of like, well, I don't feel like the same Daisy. But increasingly, people are going to come out of nowhere because there's no pathway to leadership in the media business for somebody under the age of 40 right now. There's very little mentorship. And to me, you could not have created Feed Me if you hadn't had those experiences that you have, that I was privy to because I knew you. So I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, she worked in media and startups at places that were, talked about and culturally influential. And that's why she has the skill set to do this now. But I think people have this expectation of like, oh, well, you had to be a senior editor at GQ that people know and see photos of for us to then see you make this jump to having an independent thing. And it's weird. Like, I think you just have to be very clear in like your identity, who you are, and like your experience, which is not something that is given. Like, people are not anointed anymore at places
Mm.
like Condé Nast or Hearst.
And if they are, it doesn't feel like a big deal.
Yeah. Those are the types of jobs that outside of them, you're like, wow. And then as soon as you're in them, you're like, nightmare.
Mm-hmm. Nightmare.
Well, I'm thinking
And
like
there's,
oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, people don't even stay in them that long.
No.
Like 4-year turnovers. It's not, nobody's like a lifer anymore.
The idea of like an industry plant, this is making me think of that. And like, is there even like, I don't know, like I think of my friend Harrison, the Dare, right? Like there was all these stuff about him being an industry plant on Twitter. I was like, this is fascinating because like I had known him for a while and seen him doing his like indie twee music. I'm like, no, he's been working towards this. But so I was thinking about that, and then like how now it's more like with Spotify and stuff, you read these pieces about the AI music they're putting out there, right? Like now an industry plant isn't like some person that like has just gotten a major label deal. It's an AI music thing or whatever, AI content, whatever thing that's fake and is like literally an industry plant because it's not real. It's just like is the seed of industry. Right?
Yeah, I also think people, especially in the culture industry, are so sensitive to success that feels like unearned.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you go and you Google anyone's name, like usually the Google like auto thing is parents. Or for me, for some reason, it's husband. Because I think like, and I see this in myself, like when somebody,
Tell him who he is, Daisy. Tell
when it
him.
feels
The
like
most
somebody,
famous socialist playwright. Sorry.
yeah, and only when it feels like somebody comes out of nowhere, it's like, okay, I want what they have, so I want to believe that they had a shortcut because the truth, if the truth is they just worked harder or more talented than me, that will crush my sense of myself. And whatever, like,
I mean, another question in my Q&A, I got 15 people saying, can you please explain exactly how you put together Feed Me every day? How do you decide what to include? How do you choose when to write? How do you choose who to hire? And I said, I'm not answering this. 15 of you asked this. I'm not answering this. Like this, I have this very special, precious thing that's working really well. It would be really dumb for me to tell you that. And I think anybody listening to this who reads Feed Me, if you sat down for like more than 15 minutes and thought about how I do it, you could probably figure it out. Like,
well, wait, so
it's like being like explain taste to me. Like, what are you talking about?
No,
It's
this
my
what are you
taste.
talking about?
another thing you said on the People versus Algorithm podcast that I like and really relate to is like that.
Did you listen to
there's
my first episode or my second
Yeah,
episode?
this is the most recent one because it was the
Okay,
most
fine.
recent podcast episode I could find you did. But you were like, there's no secret. It's just like my whole life leading up to this, and like because of like where I'm from, and then where I went to school, and who I met, and whatever. And it's like all these millions of things and whatever. Like I don't know. Like I think that's what's interesting. And like in Creator Spotlight, that's what I try to cover. I'm not really interested as much in like the tactical bits of how somebody grew a newsletter or built their audience or whatever. I'm like, well, who is this person and like what is the unique way that they got to here? Because I want other people to think of like, well, who am I, right? Like, what's my thing that I can do or try to do? Like, nobody should try to make the next Feed Me. You try to make whatever the thing is that you want to do.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. Yeah, that question drives me crazy. I think I said something like the path of like the path of least resistance to become successful on the internet is to become an advice columnist. And I'm not going to do that. Like, I'm not going to give you advice on how to start a newsletter. There's plenty of other people who will tell you how to do that.
My fiance and I just finished the latest season of Survivor over the weekend, and there's a couple parts where they're doing puzzles, and Jeff Probst, the host, is like, and the people are going to look at like one of the people's puzzles who's ahead, and he's like looking at the puzzle. But the thing is, if you're looking at their puzzle, like you're behind, and you should be working on your own puzzle. Like,
Yeah. Classic Survivor scenario.
Yeah.
Like everyone's always trying to see how they get across the courses and stuff.
Yeah.
Not good.
I mean, there are certain like immutable things of building a business, but if somebody wants to follow the pure growth hacking playbook, it always looks the same. Like that's a Twitter thread from a verified account. Like go find it. The experience playbook is different for every single person. And like really the only way to build, bring this home, special business in 2025 is to pair the like strategic skills with the experience and taste that only you can bring. And people go too far in one direction and think, I'm just going to do all my personal recommendations and field of dreams. If I build it, they'll come. Well, no. And then they go so far in the other direction, which is like, I'm going to just buy all my followers on Facebook and use Chat GPT to come up with a strategy and bid for the cheapest email addresses. And I'm just going to turn around and sell it to somebody else. Fine. Good luck. Nobody will remember your name. So,
right.
Like, I think what makes Feed Me so great is you've actually paired those things and you're able to pair them because you worked in the technology world and the culture world at the intersection. So you understand the way that they're symbiotic.
It's the same with dirt. Like it's very simple advice, but you have to like get a life. Like get a life, and then you'll be able to build a business in the space of culture and write about things that are interesting that nobody else is writing about. Like figure out what your life looks like and what excites you and what it feels like to go outside, and you'll get so many ideas. It's hard to teach somebody that though if they're just stuck on their phone.
Right.
I think that's a perfect place to end it.
Get a life.
Agree.
Get a life.
I agree.
This has been Tasteland. Emily, thank you for coming on.
This was really fun.